Hello, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Just Around the Block. I am Amanda B. Johnson,
And I am Michael Scott. Welcome. Glad you joined us today.
and we are fortunate to have a special guest today to talk with us about security. Mr. Scott and I were going over what we would like to talk about this week, and both of us just kept hitting on security for the end user, because in this Wild West, it is an increasing concern. And so we are pleased to introduce you to the co-founder and CEO of the Edge Wallet, formerly known as AirBitz, Mr. Paul Puey.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Glad you're here. Glad you're here, Paul. So, you and I met a month or so ago. We had a wonderful conversation about all things security. And so I
Yeah.
want to just kind of dovetail off of that conversation by asking you, what are today, what are the biggest security concerns that are out there with respect to holders of cryptocurrency? Both
Mhm.
those who are, obviously keep their keys on exchanges, as well as those that hold the cryptocurrency with their own keys. And in other words, they're managing their own keys.
Yeah,
Talk to
yeah. I
us a
think
little bit about that environment.
yeah, I think you're gonna find that I have an unpopular opinion in some ways from a lot of the industry.
That's
I
what
do
we like
fundamentally,
here, Paul.
yeah. You
Yeah,
want something that's a little bit different, right? So the
something's
popular opinion,
edgy.
though, I do agree with. So one of the opinions I have, it's definitely agreed upon, which is one of the biggest security threats in the cryptocurrency space is people holding money on exchanges, and that is because exchanges create that pot of gold, that pinata that gives attackers a huge incentive. And it's very unlike the current banking system where digitally robbing a bank is not interesting because all you do is wire the money to someone else that has KYC and information. You know where that person is, versus sending it to an anonymous public address. So I do think that that is one of the biggest threats, but close to it, if not above it, is actually user error being a huge security threat. And most people don't call that security. Most people just call that like usability or just user error. But we like to think of security as all threats to something that you're trying to protect. And if you're trying to protect digital currency, you as a user are one of the threats. We are the weak link. We're the soft and squishy versus the hard and strict. And so user error being, I think not even I think I know is, easily above or just barely at the same level as a threat of exchanges. What I
Now,
think
Paul,
is
we know what it looks like for an exchange to lose funds, either through, them being attacked from the outside or having, dishonesty from the inside. But what are you meaning when you say user errors?
user error. So frequently with most cryptocurrency wallets platforms, you're required to back up your keys. So a user error can manifest itself in multiple ways, such as just simply forgetting to back up the keys, backing them up and losing the backup, backing them up and putting them in a very insecure place. I've seen cryptocurrency lost from all three, and I've been victim to a couple of those reasons myself. So I think this is what we're seeing as being one of the biggest threats to cryptocurrency adoption. And actually, the funny thing is that it actually causes people, I have known multiple people have said this, it causes them to actually not want to hold their own keys and say, I'm just going to go put them in a custodian and trust that person. Where you're trading off one of the biggest security threats for another one of the biggest security threats. And that, I think, one of the biggest issues. The irony of it is, and this is where my opinion is probably less popular, is that I think that the industry is advocating, especially for new users even, some of the more challenging solutions to securing their cryptocurrency, which is driving people towards one of those two distinct options, which is they do it themselves and be very prone to user error, or they see these kind of advocated options and say, God, this is kind of complex. I'm just going to leave it on an exchange or with a hosting provider. That's what I
What
think
kind of
is
com what kind of complex options do you mean?
hardware wallets or wallets that just simply just throw the key in front of the user. And I know people that have used hardware wallets and ironically take the key and stick it on Google Drive and have actually
Yikes.
had their funds taken. And so I think the challenge of these what are considered ultra secure solutions is they have a major weak point, which is the backup. And the backup lies in the human. And that's where people historically have had the issue, not with the device actually being compromised. There aren't very many, if any, stories of people actually having a moderately secure device compromised and losing cryptocurrency. Yet we drive people towards the solutions that actually create the two different problems that we're seeing.
So we'll get back to key management here in a moment. And if I may, I'd like to say that I so empathize with what you're talking about in terms of people mismanaging their keys in terms of, making and keeping and storing backups. I remember the first time I opened a Bitcoin wallet, as it was, and the person who helped me before we got off the call with each other, he said, "Be sure to make a backup. See ya." And I remember not knowing what that even meant.
What does it
right?
mean? Yeah.
What does that
What do
even
you do with the backup?
What is, yeah. So we will definitely get more to that. Now, my next question is, and maybe this is irrelevant, you can tell me, but I've heard that a lot of hacks are achieved because the victim was using two-factor authentication. What are your thoughts on two-factor authentication? And is this even a thing?
So I don't think that people are hacked because they use two-factor authentication. I think the people that are hacked, when it has anything to do with two-factor, is because a lot of services actually make the second factor that you can add to your account become a one-factor method of accessing your account. So let's just kind of like rewind and give an example of what that means. Google is notoriously bad at this. So when you first set up a Gmail or Google account, you can have a username and password. So your password is one of the factors. So if someone has your password, you can access your account. Enabling two-factor makes it such that I need a second thing to access my account. And a frequent default for Google is your phone number. That every time you log in, if you don't have your phone number registered with Google, they want you to register the phone number. Well, that can be two-factor. So that way you need the password and the phone number. The problem is Google will also allow you to reset your password with just the phone number. And that's it. Effectively reducing your security to one factor. And admittedly, if you have to choose between one factor that's more secure, between your password and your phone number, you're better off with your password. Your phone number, as we've seen time and time again, frequently gets compromised by a central service attack, such as your phone company. And your phone company getting social engineered, getting your phone number ported, gets an attacker access to your phone number and able to then reset your Google account, Gmail account, which might allow them to reset your Exchange account if you don't have two-factor on there. And so this is really where two-factor isn't two-factor in the first place. And that's why people get attacked.
And Paul, what is your opinion about authenticators like Authy, for instance?
So Authy, from the last I had checked, and I haven't used Authy in a long time, Authy is tied to a phone number. So even though you're not getting an SMS, your ability to reset your Authy account is tied to your ability to just receive an SMS. So in essence, Authy is no more secure than your phone number. I've heard there might be some optional modifications to Authy to prevent that. I personally prefer Google Authenticator as a second factor. It is challenging. The user experience is very poor for Google Authenticator, especially if you start actually using multiple applications with Google Authenticator. But from the viewpoint of hardened security, it is the kind of ideal. But that herein lies, once again, that trade-off of security versus usability. And many people I know don't want to go through the trouble of using Google Authenticator because it is such a pain. But it is what I'd call the one of the more ideal two-factor solutions, outside of some more integrated solutions such as what we build at Edge.
Yeah, and like Amanda, I have a story from when I first started in crypto and Bitcoin. The guy that helped me set it up said one of the practices that you should adhere to from a security standpoint is when you set up a email address, set it up so that it's exclusively for Bitcoin or for those things that you want to keep most secure. In other words, don't publicly release the email address, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on that?
It's generally not a bad idea, just one that helps obfuscate what email address you are using to access these other accounts. Now, really, that's only important if your email address can access cryptocurrency in the first place. If cryptocurrency isn't held on anything that your email can access, then it's not that big of a deal. It's still, it doesn't hurt to have an additional email, just other than the inconvenience of having a separate email. So while I think it helps, I think the root cause of the issue can be alleviated by simply not having crypto that is accessible via an email address in the first place. Then in that sense, just use the same email that you're comfortable using, and it's convenient for you while still being secure.
So, Paul, if you could just talk a little bit about the digital security solutions that you're working on there at Edge. and what sort of value proposition that it offers to the user in terms of protecting their cryptocurrency.
Right, right. So I think when we first talked about security, we talked a lot about backup. And so
Right.
that is such a new concept for people to back up money. Like we've never had to back up money. So in Edge, people create what just feels like an account, create a regular login, password, but that automatically encrypts the keys and automatically backs it up. So there's no additional step for the user. They're effectively done as soon as they create that account. Now, when they go log in on another device, it synchronizes. So it's not just backed up, but it actually synchronizes, much like you would feel when you log into a Coinbase or a Bittrex account. Like your funds show up between the different devices. Now, when we talked about two-factor, and we mentioned, oh, what are the good solutions for two-factor? Which ones aren't? Obviously, if they're tied to SMS and email, they can be compromised. But I mentioned how Google Authenticator is a Google Authenticator's protocol itself, and we baked it into the app. It's like you have both apps sitting side by side, and then we just mashed the two together. We married the two into one app. So that inconvenience of launching Google Authenticator when you want to log in and scrolling through like 30 or 50 website names, finding which one you want, then tapping and holding to copy and paste that 6 digits, making sure you do that before the digits change because they change every 30 seconds, and then going back into your app and pasting it. That whole process is automated and invisible to the user completely. So we're really layering all of these technologies that have already existed, but hiding them from the user, making it where they just happen and then they're just invisible. You enable it and you're done. And that is at the core of what we do, but we've layered additional stuff. There's password recovery capability. There's a split key PIN login that can also decrypt your account. And then of course, if you're on mobile, biometric to decrypt your account in convenient ways. All of that is our platform also baked into our wallet.
And
right,
this
so
might,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say,
go ahead, Amanda.
Mr. Scott's going to ask you more about what you just mentioned in a moment. But before we even proceed, I just need to get caught up here. So firstly, when you say a backup is created automatically, where is it stored? And then B, so I've looked through the Edge wallet a bit, and I'm not seeing like the authenticator options you're talking about. Granted, I usually don't use authenticators either. I'm a little behind on that. So would you mind, after you answer where the backup is stored, telling us like what you mean by there's an authenticator baked in? What does that mean for the user to do with their thumb?
Right, right. So in Edge, when you create the account, the encrypted data, the data is first encrypted on your device, and then it's backed up, and it is backed up with Edge. So we do host servers that hold the backup. This is not unlike other services such as blockchain.info. The servers, they don't see who people are that actually hold this encrypted data. There's no association to personal name, phone number, email addresses, anything along those lines. So there's no personal info associated. They're just dumb encrypted blobs of data that can't be opened by anyone but the user. Second, to authenticate the user with two-factor, we take the Google Authenticator application, right? The actual application and the way and the protocol and the way the application works. If you've ever used it, there's 6 digits that keep changing every 30 seconds. We embed that inside of Edge and you never see it as a user. If you wanted to enable two-factor in Edge, you'd go to settings, unlock the settings by entering your password, and just tap a single button to enable two-factor and you're done. There's nothing left to do. And every time you log in, you're actually two-factored and you don't even know what's happening. You just simply enable it and you're done. That's why we call it one-touch two-factor. Tap once to enable it, you never see it's there after that.
And so if someone were to gain access to my device, they would need to know my Edge password, right, to access all of this. But if they knew my Edge password, then they'd be in. So like, I guess, where does the second factor come about? Just the fact that it has to be an Edge wallet on my phone. Like it can't be my username and password on someone else's phone. Is that it then?
Exactly. Exactly. If you think about it, that's exactly the same kind of protection you would have if you were using Google Authenticator or Authy on your phone. Is that someone that maybe somewhere across the world somehow gets access to your password, they still don't have your phone.
I see what you're saying.
That is effectively, so it's something you know, your password, and something you have, your phone. And that's effectively what we've baked and made it as simple, easy, as invisible to the user as possible. I forget that I even have two-factor enabled on my account because it feels just like I didn't.
Now that leads perfectly to my next question, which is, okay, so what happens in the unlikely but possible scenario that Edge goes offline and I have misplaced my phone.
Got it. So we put as much effort as we can to be as redundant and fault tolerant as possible. So the scenario that you're coming up with requires two things to fail. And in a lot of systems, you want to protect yourself from the most common failure, but it's impossible to protect yourself from everything. So realize that we would have to not just go down, Edge would have to go down and be maliciously down, delete all of the data that we have such that none of that data is available. And at the same time, you'd have to lose access to your phone. So fundamentally, we think from the viewpoint of what are the odds of someone losing cryptocurrency from user error or a hosted exchange versus the odds of that happening, where both things happen at the same time. We think that that is a fundamental tiny slice of possibility that is not likely to happen, and users are more likely and have historically actually lost funds from other reasons, such as the exchanges and user error. So yes, that is entirely possible. To answer your question, Ahmed, it's totally possible. Do we think that that's likely or something to be worried about? I think there's definitely bigger issues at play than worrying about an occurrence like that.
Mm-hmm. So dovetailing off of the theme of loss, what about, you and I talked a little bit about the loss of passwords and this dilemma that a lot of application providers have with making it simple to recover passwords, but at the same time, making it challenging. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So password recovery is definitely one of the biggest challenges of our day. And I think one of the challenges, I think the reason why it's such a challenge is because our world has required us to have many, many different passwords that are both unique and strong. And our brain can't handle that. We can't handle a bunch of different passwords, making them all unique and making them all strong. So we tend to forget. And then because we forget, we have to then recover them. And recovery historically only works when the service that's providing, the company that's providing that service has full access to the value, right? Such an exchange, a bank, a social media site. So of course, they send you an email, you say, yeah, that's me, and then you're back in. With encrypted data, password recovery hasn't existed before. You encrypt that data, that data is encrypted with that password, you're not getting in unless you have it. So this is a unique opportunity where cryptocurrency has said, no, we've got to solve this problem. And this is something that we've tackled at Edge, and we've come up with a password recovery solution that, while not feeling exactly the same as what you'd have with an exchange or a social media site, is very usable and very familiar. And it's very much inspired by multi-sig in the sense that we're taking keys, splitting those keys, and requiring them to come together to reactivate the account. And so I can go into a little bit more detail about that. It's
yes,
semi-technical.
Yeah. And I was going to say one of the things that I notice about my app is that Edge app is it provides me with reminders to log in with the password, and I can kind of opt out of it. But can you talk a little bit about why that occurs? What's kind of the thinking behind that?
The thinking behind that is we are humans. We are imperfect human beings, and memory is a piece of our kind of ability that needs reminding. And we realize that with time, when you etch something into someone's head, it becomes more and more permanent. So the reminders are there to give people that opportunity to say, oh, do I know it? If I don't, oh, maybe I should actually get my money off of this device before I lose it, because the password is their backup. If they lose their phone, they need the password to get onto another device. So it is an opportunity, and we try to apply human heuristics into that. And that's what our company is about. We don't just try to build technology and just say, screw the human, we're all tech. We try to blend human and technology. And I think that's been at the heart of success of many companies like Apple, right? It's a blend of humanity and technology. So that's the reason for those password reminders, independent of the password recovery that we build, which is separate from that, because we think it's nice just to not forget it. And then second to that, if you do, having recovery options.
And tell us about how a password can be recovered through Edge. So I put my funds on Edge. I forgot my password. What do I do?
Got it. So recovery today, because we haven't driven it and made it mandatory, is a process that does require a setup. For other companies that use our platform, especially the web-based apps like Augur and Wings, the setup is actually part of the setting up of your account. However, for Edge, for a lot of people that want to just get a wallet set up really quickly, we haven't made it mandatory. But the setup process is fairly straightforward. You go into settings, you set up password recovery, and you pick 2 personal questions and you answer them. And then, and this is the part that's a little bit unique, the application creates an email that you send to yourself. So Edge is not sending this email. Edge never sees this email. It's just an email you send yourself. So that's stored in your email account. And most people have a very persistent email account. And then Edge holds a key along with an encrypted version of those questions and answers. So there's one key held by Edge and another one held in your email. You need both of those keys to get back access into your account. One is not enough. And so the recovery process after you've set it up is simply go to your email, you click on a link that actually holds one of the keys, click on the link, it goes into Edge, you answer the questions, and you're back in. It's as simple as that. So the only difference with that and regular password recovery is, well, you do have to set it up. And we do aim to make that a default part of the process. We're fine-tuning when that gets introduced into the user and the user experience of that, because we want to balance kind of the friction of creating an account with making sure that people have an account that's recoverable. I think in AirBitz, we have some heuristics by which when you receive a certain amount of money, then it's going to say, hey, we recommend you set up password recovery. And Edge will probably use some similar heuristics as well.
And when you say questions, is that the kind of stuff like my mother's maiden name, where I had my first kiss, that kind of stuff questions?
Things like that. We'll try to steer mostly away from publicly discoverable events and names and whatnot. But generally speaking, yeah, they're two personal questions, two simple personal questions and answers. And we're able to keep the questions fairly simple because the questions themselves are not enough to get out into the account. You also need the key. So the combination of those, much like multisig, if you think about multisig, is built on this principle of two things, two factors built on this principle.
Right.
Making the security need these two factors, each one can be easier to get, right? Because the two are separated.
I was going to say, I love what you mentioned about the actual questions, Paul. I'm oftentimes hesitant when people, ask for security responses to security questions. The proverbial your maiden name or some other sort of identifier that I'm thinking to myself, this could kind of lead down a rabbit hole in terms of my personal identity.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, those questions are not seen, nor are the answers seen by anyone but the user. They're actually encrypted by a random key before they're sent to our server. So our server isn't checking that the actual questions and answers match. They're actually just checking that a hash of the answers match. And then the questions aren't even seen, they're encrypted. They're encrypted with the key that the user holds in their email. So that key, the questions get downloaded to the user and they get decrypted so the user can see the questions themselves. So Edge has no idea what questions are even being chosen in the first place. So from the viewpoint of privacy, it's 100% private. From the viewpoint of usability, it's still totally usable.
And now I'd like to clarify in terms of, okay, so I painted this scenario before where both, the very unlikely scenario, as you point out, where both Edge goes down and my phone is lost. That's, we talked about that. But now if Edge goes down for a while, my wallet still works though, right?
Yes, so the wallet can continue to function because the keys exist on the device. And you can always decrypt them using fingerprint or biometric, Face ID, or just a full password, because Edge is just a backup. The keys are on the device. And not only that, but the wallet actually communicates to the decentralized network, directly to the Bitcoin, Litecoin network, Bitcoin Cash network. And it doesn't even go through our servers to send and receive money. So Edge can actually go down for a little bit of time, and users might not even notice that we're down because it just simply talks to the network.
If I wanted to pull my private keys out of my Edge wallet, can I do that?
Absolutely. You can go to each wallet and you tap like the three buttons to the side of the wallet and you say, I think it's get master private key or get private key or master private key, one of those settings. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's along the lines of master private key. Okay. And then you could see the entire 24 words and you can write it down. So people can always get it out. We don't drive people down that path because fundamentally that's actually a security risk. As soon as you've shown the key to the user on screen, that's a security risk if the user happens to have a keylogger. You cannot two-factor a private key. Once it's seen, it's gone, right? And as well, where is the user going to put that private key once they see it? Are they going to take a screenshot of it? Are they going to write it down, put it in Google Drive? Are they going to go and put it on a piece of paper under their keyboard at work? All of those are potential means for compromise. And so fundamentally, we think, yes, if you're a power user, you know what you're doing. We don't want to restrict you access to what is effectively your money and your data. But for the average user, we don't want to shovel them through that path. Instead, we want to build a technology where it's done for them.
So that just leads me to my final question then, which is, in what direction do you see the cryptocurrency industry going as far as managing their own keys? Do you think that more people will manage their own keys, or where are we headed?
I do think that more people will manage their own keys. And I think that's because we'll see that exchanges are both a security risk, and what I think isn't talked about enough, an unpopular opinion, is that exchanges or hosted wallets, better saying, are actually a utility, are broken from a utility point of view. In a world where we're actually using cryptocurrency, holding it in a hosted wallet makes them very unusable because so much of the funds are held offline for security reasons. I think not enough people talk about this, but if you actually try to use cryptocurrency from a hosted wallet, especially when volumes are high and people are trading and moving money, you'll find that the money just doesn't move because so much of it is offline. So from that viewpoint, I do think in the utility phase of cryptocurrency, not the speculative phase, kind of the utility phase, many people will be holding their own keys. Now, how are they going to be holding it? We're obviously going to be taking the guess that it's going to be in tools similar to Edge, where it feels natural, it's forgiving, yet still secure and usable. But I think that we're going to have a future where exchanges aren't the way people hold it. We'll also move towards decentralized exchanges where they never touch your money, right? It's just simply smart contracts. And also services like Shapeshift, where they're not holding your money, it's just passing through them, even if they're centralized. And so I think that is the future we're going to see. And we're seeing integrations with decentralized wallets, integrating with even centralized services, the way we have in AirBitz with Gladera, where you can buy from your bank account, but it goes from your bank account directly into Bitcoin, and only for a slice of time are your funds in risk. I think that's the future that we're going to see. The integrations can feel just as seamless as an exchange, but not provide us with all of that counterparty risk that we have today.
Well, before I let you go, Paul, would you clarify for us? I hear you referencing AirBitz as though that is its own separate thing that wasn't totally rebranded as the Edge wallet. What are you talking about when you say AirBitz with Gladera?
Right. So AirBitz was not just the original name of our company, but it was our first mobile application, our first mobile wallet. And AirBitz was just a Bitcoin wallet. It still exists. People are still using it. It's still in the app stores. Edge is the rebrand of the company, and it's also our new multi-currency wallet, but it's actually written from the ground up. It does not yet have all of kind of the bells and whistles and functionality of AirBitz, which is why we're currently supporting both of them. We are slowly porting all of that functionality, such as the integration with Gladera, the integration with Biggie.com, integration with LibertyX, and some other services. All of those are getting ported over. But for now, they both exist. We support both of them, but one's Bitcoin only with kind of its history of different bells and whistles, and then one is newer, Edge wallet, multi-currency, not having all of the features yet of AirBitz. So, but eventually we do plan to deprecate AirBitz once we have all that functionality ported over, just not at this point in time.
Paul, thank you so much for your time. And viewers, let us know what you thought of today's episode in the comments section below.
Cool. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you for joining us.